Welcome back to Sledgehammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Now, today I'm joined by the amazing Evil Nate. Nate, how you doing today, man?
Hey, I appreciate that, man. I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I've been looking forward to this for a very long time. But before we talk about why you're here, my friend, I would like for the people that don't know you to get to know you a little bit. You are from Pikeville, Kentucky, and started independent professional wrestling at the age of 19. Now,
Yeah.
the tie-ins with this, I've noticed that a lot of professional wrestlers and professional wrestling fans are horror fans, and I think it's because of the difference between fantasy and reality. We can go out and live our biggest fantasies through pro wrestling just like we can horror movies. And
Yeah.
you're also a huge Texas Chainsaw Massacre fan, and you carry a replica Excalibur chainsaw from Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 that's been signed, authenticated, and used by R.A. Milehoff, Leatherface from Part 3. So what made you decide to have that be who you are in professional wrestling?
Well, I think the reason, and it's funny, I just had this conversation with Brett Wagner on a podcast earlier this week, the Lost Leatherface from the remake. He gets the
Yeah.
Kemper kill in when he hits Kemper with the sledgehammer. Sledgehammer
Yeah.
horror, baby. So which is awesome. A good tie-in right there.
Yeah.
We had this conversation really quickly. I think the reason wrestling and horror they have such a crossover with fans, it's because of the characters, not only just of escaping reality, but especially slasher movies. Slasher
Yeah.
movies, it's all about characters. Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers, Leatherface, Chucky, Pinhead, Freddy, they're characters. And it's also it just they're because if when you go back to like Memphis wrestling and stuff, even Jerry the King Lawler was using like a Leatherface, a Freddy, or you go to Japan wrestling and FMW, there's a Freddy. Corporal Kirshner was Leatherface. So I think that's the reason there's such a crossover. We get to get lost in this
Yeah.
fictional world of these characters, these larger than life characters. Now, for me, as you pointed out, yeah, I carried the Excalibur from Part 3 out to the ring. I haven't always done that. Dahlia and myself, which by the way, she says hi. She puts you over all the time, and she's getting ready to do a podcast tonight as soon as I finish this one for you. So she
She's
has nothing
amazing.
but
You guys already seen her episode. She's the one that hooked me and Evil Nate up. She's a
yeah,
gem of a human being. Absolutely
yeah.
adore her.
She's fantastic, and she puts you over all the time. So she had me
Thank
pumped
you.
up to come on here. But before I started doing the Evil Nate horror gimmick and stuff and carrying the chainsaw, I was doing a rock star gimmick, and it was fun. I was always a bad guy heel with that,
Mhm.
but I've always had such a passion for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise in particular because there's just something about it. Even like the worst movies out of the series, like if you're a fan of the series, more times often than not, you're gonna like all of the films for some reason, no matter how bad they are. Like, and that's me. I like them all. So I know when I was a little kid and I saw like Terry Funk coming out to the ring with a chainsaw, that's
Oh,
Chainsaw Charlie.
Chainsaw Charlie, baby.
It was like it was really cool. Like I was like, man, that's awesome. And then later on, I saw Corporal Kirshner as Leatherface in Japan, and he would clear like the crowd. They would take off running, and I said, man, that's awesome. So I knew I couldn't do the chainsaw gimmick first, but I knew there was guys that made Excalibur chainsaw replicas, and I knew
Mhm.
nobody's ever carried one to the ring. So I was like, I want that chainsaw anyway. I'm going to get that and carry it to the ring. So that's what Dolly and we came up with. And then it just so happened, R.A. Mihailoff, I was friends with him on Facebook, and he needed to use the chainsaw for his photo ops at Scarefest in Lexington. And he hit me up and he was like, hey, brother. And I was like, oh my God, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can
Yeah.
use it anytime. So long story short, it's just like everything coming together. So
And it's amazing how sometimes you can have that perfect storm of things happen. You know, you and Dahlia coming together and
yeah,
creating this gimmick, and then all the things that come with that. Because, like you said, to do it first is not always the most important, but to be the most
no,
memorable and to do it the best, that's
yeah.
where it's at. And what is more memorable than Excalibur?
Yeah,
You know,
bro, it's and it's such to see everybody they'll light up when they see the chainsaw. Whether you've even seen the Texas Chainsaw franchise, don't like it or not. Every
right?
time I bring that chainsaw into a locker room, like I'll bring it into a wrestling locker room, and there'll be guys on the show that I've watched on TV, like as recent as a couple years ago. And they will stop, like, I don't know if you know who Heath Slater is that used to be in the
Oh, of course.
WWE. I was at a show last year in West Virginia, and he comes in and the chainsaw's sitting there, and he stops and he just like looks it up and down, and he's like, "That's a big ass chainsaw," and it was hysterical, and because everybody stops and look, and then like Dahlia and myself, because she's such a little person, she'll put it on her shoulders, and when she carries it through a crowd like this year at Scarefest, so she's already this hot girl, and then she's carrying this big old chainsaw that's bigger than her. So everybody's just stopping and looking. They're like, what is going on here? So it really, like always, the chainsaw has helped create and turn me into an attraction. So I've been able to get bookings because of the chainsaw and because of the gimmick. And then they can see that I'm more than just the chainsaw. They'll see me wrestle.
Right.
And so like I can get there and then I can like stay there with my ability in the ring or on the microphone. So.
And that's another huge part of it. And even funnier, because I'm sure Heath Slater told his kids about that chainsaw right away.
I'm sure.
And like I said, being a fan of professional wrestling and like you talked about with horror and stuff, it's not just your in-ring ability, something you just brought up, your ability on the mic, even on the independent circuit, to be able to bring people in. And whether you're drawing that heat or, you're getting that pop, it doesn't matter. No. Because your ability on the mic sometimes is just as important as your in-ring abilities. I mean, look at John Cena, look at Dwayne Johnson. These guys have an uncanny ability on that mic. John Cena, whether you love the guy or you hate him as a professional wrestler, it's hard to argue that he isn't one of the best of all time on the mic and one of the best people of all time with all the stuff he does for the Make-A-Wish Foundation and children and stuff. But you listen to those guys when they get on the mic, it's just insane the things they're able to do.
Yeah, you're not wrong about that. For me, that's the biggest part. Like the greatest of all time, you have to be able to like, and it's fun to like guys like and Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, and those guys. Those guys are fine, but it's the larger than life characters, and you got to be able to talk. And even like Ultimate Warrior, Hulk Hogan, Macho Man Randy Savage, like those guys. For me, Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock, that's who I grew up on. And like that's like right now, I absolutely love the guy LA Knight that's in the WWE.
Oh yeah.
Like that's right there. That is essential. Mm-hmm. Like that's wrestling. Like for me, that's what it's all about. I don't care how many cartwheels you can do, flips, and that's fine. That's fine that you do that. That's good. But for me, it's all about, I want the promo and I want the moments. And that's what I try to bring to what I do on the independents. And hopefully someday I get to bring that to a larger stage. That's the goal for me. And I feel like, I'm able to do that with horror and like the cryptozoology aspect as well. And like just like mixing it all together.
And I love what you guys do. And you were talking about, the ability to be on the mic. I think that's one of the reasons that Jeff Hardy was never a big superstar. I was always a big Jeff Hardy fan, but the guy froze up on the mic, and that's one of those things that, he had all the charisma in the world. He had the in-ring ability, but you put a mic in front of the guy and he just froze. And
there's some guys that they can't translate it to the mic. They can't like get it out. But if you take somebody like, now I know he's a lightning rod of controversy, but like CM Punk, the reason CM Punk resonated, it's not because he was doing flips. It's because he's cutting promos, and what he was doing was registering with everybody. And you loved him or you hated him. Either way, he made you feel something. And he knew
when to break that fourth wall too. I'll never forget the time he was cutting a promo on Triple H in the ring, and he told him, "This isn't CM Punk talking to Triple H. This is Phil Brooks talking to Paul Levesque."
And right now, this isn't CM Punk talking to Triple H. This is Phil Brooks talking to Paul Levesque.
So when you have this guy that's able to call out his boss by his shoot name, and not be, to be able to pull that off is something huge. When he's dropping the pipe bomb and he's referencing Colt Cabana and stuff, those are the things for me. I'm like, whether I love this guy or I hate this guy, like you said, he's making an impact on me, and he's making me remember him just because of these promos alone.
Yeah, it's very important. The promos are very important. And if you go back in time, all the way to Gorgeous George in the early 1900s, that's the reason he was working. And you come up to I mean, even classy Freddie Blassie out on the West Coast back at that time period. But then you start coming up to superstar Billy Graham, the Tower of Power, Too Sweet to Be Sour, Funky Like a Monkey, which comes into the Jesse Venturas, the Hulk Hogan's, the Randy Savages, and you gotta be able to talk them in because,
Yep.
I mean, that's what works. Like I like MMA to a degree, I like boxing to a degree. I just enjoy combat sports, and when people are cutting promos, that's what works. That's what works in MMA. That's the reason Conor McGregor, if you like him or hate him, that's the reason he works. He's cutting promos because then that's what I tell everybody is that you don't want to just go watch Joe Schmo that you live next to on your TV or in the squared circle. Like, it's okay to have those guys like a Spike Dudley or a Mikey Whipwreck because it's got to be a buffet. But everybody, like, there's somebody that says that if everybody's 7 foot tall, you got no giants. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah.
No, and completely agreed. And the biggest part of this is, like he said earlier, Evil Nate is on the independent wrestling circuit. And the best way to stay up to date on where he's doing his shows at is by following him on social media. And you can do that by clicking these links down in the description. So make sure you're following him to stay up to date on all the things he has. Maybe you can go check him and Dahlia out live. And that would be an amazing experience for you to be able to see Excalibur in person, as well as Evil Nate and the Dahlia. So, man, I love talking pro wrestling with you, and I could do that for hours. But in order for you to be, carrying Excalibur and to have this horror themed, like you said, with the cryptid and stuff like that, horror had to start for you somewhere, my friend. So now I would like to go back to the past and talk about what got you started in the horror genre, your first horror movie. And Nate, the first horror movie you watched was?
Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. That was it. It was, as a kid, I was always aware. I mean, I have memories of dressing up as like Jason Voorhees as a kid, like when I'm 5 years old. So at some point I became aware of it's like everybody knows who, I don't know, Michael Jackson is, like as a kid. You just, at some point you just know, you don't even remember when you found out. It's just like you're born and it's in your mind. You're like, okay, I know who Michael Myers is. I know who Michael Jackson is. I know who, Ozzy Osbourne. Like at some point, like everything is just whoosh. And it's like, I don't even remember when I learned this. But for me, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, my parents had rented it. It's got to be like 1995. The VHS, they rented it. And I came in and I saw it, and I was scared and excited. And then fast forward, the next thing I saw was it was Child's Play and then like Hellraiser 3, which Hellraiser 3 traumatized me, scared the holy hell out of me, especially the whole Pinhead when he's in the club and he just like kills the entire, he's slaughtered. Terrifying, scared me to death. So Texas Chainsaw 3 was the first horror movie I have memory of like witnessing.
And I know that you were, a young man when you watched it for the first time. You were with your parents the first time you had seen it. But do you remember which scene it was that affected you the most?
At that point, I don't. I just remember. I remember the chainsaw because I'd actually made up a completely different plot in my own mind, and it wasn't what was happening at all. Like, it was completely different than what the movie actually was. So I just remember the chainsaw, and I knew Leatherface was in it. When that's all I knew. But then when I fast forward to a couple years later, and I got my hands on it again, and I got to watch it, the scene that really affected me and stands out in that movie is probably when he first shows up. Like, they're having car trouble, they're changing the tire, and like she's like freaking out. She's like, "Hey, we gotta go." And he's like, "You got to hold the light on me." And the Leatherface shows up, starts the saw. He ends up ripping the trunk off, and it's just really awesome. So
yeah. And this is a very grimy movie. And I just mean, it looks dirty and grimy and scary throughout the whole movie. And it's obviously part of a bigger franchise. And whenever I like to talk about franchise films, I always like to ask, Texas Chainsaw, they're still making movies today. We just got the Texas Chainsaw 2022, the Netflix original film. Is Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, which was your first, is that your favorite in the franchise? And if not, which would you say is your favorite?
Part one is going to be my favorite because part one, I mean, you're talking that film came out 1974. They filmed it in 1973. I believe it was filmed on 8mm film, if I'm not mistaken. But something about that entire film, the atmosphere, the intensity, the uneasiness, and I love too how it just slowly, everything slowly is like going bad for Franklin, the guy in the wheelchair. Everything, he's having the worst day ever. There's also like a hidden supernatural theme, like underneath it, if you pay attention. There's like some, I mean, because from the hitchhiker putting the sign on the side of the van to just, there's a news report going on about all the bad stuff in the world. It's playing in the background. You got to really pay attention to it. So the atmosphere of that entire film, it's really scary. And then finally, after Leatherface shows up and he bashes Kirk in the head and slams that door, and then the music done, and you're like, it's just the intensity, the scary. There's just everything. It's the perfect storm for a horror movie, and to have done something like that now, 50 years ago, basically, well ahead of its time. So it's a really good movie, really, really good. It's perfect.
I actually make the argument a lot, and I'm pretty much alone in this. I've never considered the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre film a slasher. To me, it was pretty much a home invasion gone wrong. I mean, Leatherface and the family, they didn't go out looking for these kids. They weren't out, stalking them and chasing them down. They came into their house, and so I've always looked at this as more of like an artsy. I mean, you look at all the shots of like the bones and the opening scene of the skeleton on the headstone, all the roadkill stuff, and all the lengths they went to filming this just to make it the most beautiful, amazing but dirty and grimy film they could possibly make. If this movie came out today, I think it would be an A24 film. I really do. I think it would be one of those A24 artsy, elevated horror films, if you want to call it that.
I can see that. I can see that. Absolutely. I get where you're coming from. I do call it a slasher because where it's because of the theme of it, because it technically is home invasion because of what happens. Like, so I've never even taken that route. So that's actually really cool. And the reason I still consider it a slasher is just the theme of it. And it's the same thing, because what's really funny is, for me, the same year, another movie came out, Black Christmas. It was the same year, same time period. And actually, they do the same thing in Black Christmas they do in Chainsaw. You never see anything on the screen. It's all up here. Everything you see happens up here in your head off screen. So Black Christmas and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, to me, are the quintessential like slasher movies that kickstart everything. Like and of course Psycho that predates them. Psycho, of course. But like those two coming out in 1974, like literally, they dropped on the same day. Like Texas Chainsaw dropped in October 1st, 1974 here in America, or 73. Okay, I think it's 74. And then 74. Black Christmas in Canada was the same day. So, but the fact that both of those movies hit the same day and they're so good and they do the same thing but different, it's amazing. Like, so.
And there was no Google back then. For them to be able to do that. And I've always had Black Christmas as one of my all-time favorite movies. I think Black Christmas,
I watch it every year. Every year for Christmas, I watch it.
So damn amazing, man. It's one of those movies that it just, to me, you want to talk about a movie that's ahead of its time. You have a woman telling a man, "Hey, I'm not going to drop out of school for you. That's not going to happen. You failed your little piano recital. That's on you. I'm not giving up my dreams because you have to give up yours." And she also tells him, like, if I want to have an abortion, I'm going to have a fucking abortion. You're not going to tell me what I can and can't do. In 1974, you have these women that are standing up to these men. And it's just like so ahead of its time and its themes and its social message. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
Well, and too, with Chainsaw too. So Chainsaw, you have the hippies and they're coming into the redneck territory. And like that's two different worlds. That's essentially liberal versus conservative. That's left wing versus right wing, Democrat versus Republican. And I'm not getting into politics. I'm just saying though that's really what it is. It's two worlds colliding, and that's what, like, both of those films, they're the same, but they're so different, and they're very, very vital. So,
and it's amazing because I've always said that, because one of the things I hate the most on this entire planet is when people use the term woke horror. To me, that's a big oxymoron because horror has had social messages and social issues since it started.
Horror, the whole point of horror is to make you uncomfortable and to make you question everything. Horror's been like that since it's been like that since Nosferatu, and that's Dahlia's favorite horror movie. It's been like that since the beginning. That's the point of horror. Horror is not supposed to be a rom-com, an action movie, or some type of whatever. Like horror is supposed to make you feel uncomfortable, make you feel uneasy, make you question everything that's going on about your mortality, about the fate of the world, about your neighbor, about your community, everything. That's what it's for. And that's the reason, like, slashers for me, that's my favorite subgenre of horror. Now, don't get me wrong, I love like zombie films. I enjoy. I'm not as big on possession films, but I still like them, especially like the originals, or if they do something really good, I like them.
Right.
But slashers for me are the ones that I've always gravitated toward, and that goes back to the characters. So, yeah, Texas Chainsaw for me is the greatest franchise, and I actually even have a fan theory video I'm going to be dropping this weekend about connecting the first 4 movies, and it actually makes a lot of sense. I can tell it on here too, because I ain't got a problem with it. I've been telling everybody about it since we've been doing like the conventions and stuff, and everybody's like, okay, I can actually see that. That makes sense. So
yeah. Well, I mean, I do, because by the time this episode comes out, that's already going to be released. So, guys, I have that link down in the description as well with Nate's social media. That way you could check out his full connection to try to get.
Thanks.
I would love to watch that, because I would love to see how you connect these first 4 films. That's something I'm excited to see. Now, I got to ask you this question. I think I already know the answer, but my little buddy Ghostface has been waiting here patiently to ask you. So I'm going to let him step in here for a minute. We know what your first horror movie was with Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. But now my little buddy Ghostface is here, and he has a question for you. What's your favorite scary movie, Nate? What is your favorite horror movie of all time?
Favorite horror movie of all time? It's probably still going to go back to Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like, if I knew that, I probably got 2 hours left on this earth, and like, hey, I've done everything, and what's the last movie I'm going to watch? I guess I'm going to watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
That's awesome.
Question is which one out of the franchise, because I love the first one so much, but then I also love I used to hate part 4 with Matthew McConaughey, but man, over the past 10 years I have grown to love that movie so much. I mean, when we went up to Cinema Wasteland at the beginning of this year, and they were doing the anniversary for Chainsaw, and I went specifically to meet Kim Hinkle, and I told him, I was like, man, I love Chainsaw 4. And I actually got him to sign the poster. So.
That's awesome, dude. And one thing I can say about Texas Chainsaw 4, you will never be bored or not entertained watching that movie. I mean, you can say what you want about, the Illuminati, the FBI subplot and what have you, but the movie is so damn entertaining, and it's so over the top that I could watch it.
It's a music video. It's like
it really is.
It's like a music video. Like Kim Hinkle, I know he didn't direct a lot of stuff, but that movie, like the soundtrack, and that's something funny too, like the Texas Chainsaw movies that have soundtracks, the soundtracks are amazing. Part 2 soundtrack is great. Part 3 is like 80s hair metal, kick ass. And then part 4, you have all this really cool alternative rock on that soundtrack. So like those part 2, 3, and 4, the soundtracks to those movies are awesome. I love those soundtracks.
I agree. And a lot of times the soundtrack and a score can make or break a film. So
yeah.
I know I said this at the beginning, guys, but we are getting to the end of the 3rd act. The credits are about to roll and the curtain's about to drop. But before that happens, I have one last question for you, Nate. We're going to bounce back to Texas Chainsaw 3. And what we're going to do is rank this movie on a skull count. Now, we're not ranking it on acting, production, score, direction, nothing like that. All we're doing is strictly ranking this movie on how much it affected you on your first viewing. So 0 skulls being not effective, 5 being extremely effective. You can use half and quarter skulls anywhere in the middle. Nate, what would your ranking of Texas Chainsaw 3 be?
It's 5 skulls. And 5 skulls is the, like top tier, especially if you watch the unrated director's cut from Jeff Burr, who unfortunately passed away a couple weeks ago or about a month ago. I know he passed away right before Scarefest, which really sucked. I always wanted to meet him, and I never got to. So if you get to watch like his unrated director's cut and check out some of the deleted scenes, like or the alternate scenes, there's an alternate ending where Leatherface's daughter, she's in the back of a police car, and like she is like waving to Kate Hodges, a final girl character. And then there's Viggo Mortensen. He shows up all burned up, and he gets killed in one of the family's own traps. So if you get to watch like the scenes that were cut, left on the cutting room floor, or the just unrated director's cut, I really like it because there's something very memorable about it. Even though I can tell it's not filmed in Texas and it was filmed in California, I can easily tell that. It's still a very fun, different movie. It's got a cool. That's funny too. All the chainsaws, they have an atmosphere. Every one of them have this really weird atmosphere.
And I think that's why that franchise has stood the test of time, because there's not another franchise out there that you can put up to say, this reminds me of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
No, it's there's no, and you're never in the middle on that franchise or the first one. You either love it or you hate it. It's like there's no in between. And when people love that, they will like support it until the end. And what's cool is like, I love like the past 2 years since the movie came out on Netflix in 2022. It's been like the 2 years of Leatherface. We got the video game. His stuff was all over Spirit Halloween. Finally, it used to kill me. We'd have all the slashers at Spirit Halloween or Halloween Express or in Walmart. I mean, this year you could actually get Leatherface stuff at Walmart, which is awesome.
Right. And it's like I said, it's one of those things where 2022's film, I feel really pushed that, because say what you want about that film. I really enjoyed that film. I thought the kills were great. I wasn't a huge fan of the Sally Hardesty storyline. I thought that was
hated her. That's the only thing. I tell everybody that, dude, that was not Sally Hardesty. I liked the movie. I feel like Mark, I forget his last name, that played Leatherface. Great. Loved him.
He was great.
Thought he was great. I enjoy some of the plot. Was it a little similar to Halloween 2018? Of course it was. But here's what I will say to defend that. Before Halloween 2018, love it or hate it, there was Texas Chainsaw 3D, which already did that. So it already happened. Sorry, guys. It wasn't, you can say what you want, but Leatherface did it first. But anyway, the Netflix Chainsaw, there was really good things and really bad things. The worst thing out of it was the Sally Hardesty character. The second thing,
unnecessary.
Yeah, because that didn't come off like Marilyn Burns at all. Like, that did not come off like her.
The part that irritated me is when she saw him, she's like, "Do you remember me?" And he just walks away. I'm like, are you serious? She's just spending her whole life to try to find him, and this is what she's like. Come on, I could go on a whole rant about that.
Oh, bro, same. Terrible.
No, and I do, Nate, I want to thank you, man, for taking the time out. We've been trying to get this work and get our schedules to link up.
Thank you.
After I talked to Dahlia, the first thing she said was, you got to get a hold of Nate. You got to get a hold of Nate. And I'm so happy I did, because I told her the minute she told me that, I said, of course. You know, if he's coming highly recommended from you, you're good people, I'd absolutely love to have him. So I want to remind you guys, all of his links are in the description, as well as the link to his video connecting the first 4 Chainsaw movies. So make sure you're checking that out. Make sure you're giving those a like, and make sure you're following on social media so you can stay up to date. Nate, please don't go anywhere, my friend. I got a couple more questions for you. Okay. Everybody else, if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. It helps the channel more than you know. And follow Sledgehammer Horror on social media. Our links are in the description as well. But until next time, keep talking horror, stay what you are, and we'll see you guys soon.